subway prayer. Oh, you getting it? Working now? Okay. Satan hates prayer, so I was going to pray for it. So he just gave up. We have a great God. Heavenly Father, we come into your presence with praise and adoration, thanksgiving. And Lord, you are a God worthy of praise. And Lord, as we see tonight, as we are going through the book of Hosea, your wife, Israel, abandoned you. And too often we, as the body of Christ, as church members, sometimes we abandon you, Lord. We follow other gods, but you are the true and living God whom we should follow. So help us learn these lessons, and we thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, as we said, chapters 1 through 3 dealt with primarily Hosea, his wife Gomer. God told him to take a wife. She turns out they have 3 children. That's mentioned at the beginning. She has other children, but God told him what to name them, and they were not very complimentary names, because names in that culture really meant something. But God was using it and as an example of the nation Israel. And when I say the nation Israel, I'm referring to the northern kingdom. Again, when you read your Bible, sometimes it says Israel, that's both, all 12 tribes. A lot of times, though, it just refers to the 10 tribes in the north, especially after Jeroboam first came along and Rehoboam, and they split. And if Rehoboam had listened to the wise counsel, they wouldn't have split. But because of his pride and the young whippersnappers who came along, who was his counselors, and they were full of pride, and so it caused a split. And which contention comes through pride. So we are up to chapter 4, and we are in verses 11 through 14. And this was the guilt of Israel's idolatrous citizens. So God is focusing on different aspects of the nation, or the Israel, and various aspects, and he's showing that all of them are guilty of being idolatry, of going into idolatry. So we see here in verse 11, this is where we're going to start, whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. And so this, again, this idolatry they're talking about is 2 kinds. There was a physical idolatry in which they were actually worshiping false gods, and the whoredom was also physical. They were actually committing those sins, but ultimately it was spiritual. They had abandoned their God, who had blessed them. Remember the setting, Israel was being very blessed at this time, and they were very prosperous, and God had blessed them richly, but they were relying in themselves and other countries to enrich them, rather than relying upon Yahweh to help them and guide them. So it's interesting, whoredom, and it says, and wine and new wine take away the what? Heart. And a lot of people, as far as drinking and that kind of stuff, if you never take the first one, you never have to worry about taking the second one. But there's too many stories. Linda will remember this about Heaney, Dr. Olaw's brother, who was an alcoholic. He got saved, went back up in the UP. Some of his Christian friends up there, they were social drinkers. And come on, Heaney. And so he did, and he became a drunkard again. And so your influence say, what's that? I mean, is that the stocks in the, where you have your cattle or what? No, what it's referring to is the wooden idols. Remember Diana, they carved them out of stone there, but they would make their idols like wooden idols. You see Buddha and all those guys, but they carve little. So that's what he's talking about. It says, you ask counsel of these wooden idols that you make with your hands, and then you're going to worship. That doesn't make sense to me. Why would you worship something that you could create? So that's what he's referring to there, the first part. Then it says, and their staff declareth unto them. And you've probably seen, what do they call them, a divine stick, you have the willow, and it's supposed to go down and make the water, there's the water. Well, that's what it was talking about. It was a diviner's rod. And that's what it's talking. Their staff declareth unto them. In other words, they weren't going to Yahweh for advice and counsel. They were going to the wooden idols or these divinity rods type things. And it says, in doing that, it says, for the spirit of whoredoms. I mean, in the previous verse, it said, you've lost your heart. These things have taken away your heart. Now it's getting you into your spirit, and it has caused you to err. And so that is what that verse is referring to here, and this is what the Israelites had done in the Northern Kingdom. Then this is a verse that's very applicable today. They sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burn incense upon the hills, under oaks and poplars and elms, because the shadow thereof is good. Therefore your daughters shall commit whoredom, and your spouses shall commit adultery. So, what this has implication of, it is sort of an inconvenience in one way. You got to get up Sunday morning, or here's Wednesday, and like tonight, you got out, and hopefully the weather was good, and you was taking a chance to come here. It's a little bit inconvenient. Well, what this is talking about, it says they worship their idols on mountaintops and under the trees because it was so convenient. I mean, you could just find a mountaintop. And is this not what many of the people today, I worship God out in nature. I got to go camping this week. It's so much more convenient. I can worship God there just as well I can in church. No, you can't. God's not there. Sorry. And God, it says, don't forsake the assembly of yourselves together. And that's not the church. The church, it's not a building. It's a body of believers. And I shared with my Sunday school class last week, one of the things of coming together is we get to encourage one another. I mean, you are an encouragement to me. You're here. And I know you're not that God needs to be encouraged, but it's a blessing to Him to see your faithfulness and that you want to worship Him. And you're not doing these whoredoms and going to false gods. You want to hear the true and living God. And he said, therefore your daughters shall commit whoredom, and your spouses shall commit adultery. And it goes on here in the next verse. I'll read it, and it kind of ties it together. It says, I will not punish your daughters when they commit whoredom, nor your spouses when they commit adultery. For themselves are separated with whores, and they sacrifice with harlots. Therefore, the people that doeth not understand shall fall. So, what he's saying here, he says, I'm not going to just punish the females, the women, because the males are doing the exact same thing. talks about uh, uh, they sacrifice with harlots. What they're referring to is, especially if you go into the Old Testament, 1 Kings 14, 15, 22, it talks about that at these temples they furnished homosexual relationships. They furnished prostitutes, male and female. And so that's what they're saying. They sacrifice with harlots. And they engage in immoralities with, but they would say, yeah, but I'm worshiping God. I mean, that's how perverse they are in their thinking. Remember, God said in Romans, God gave them over to what kind of a mind? A reprobate mind. And that's what we really see today. I mean, just within our lifetime, most of us are older, and we've been around a few years, but the openness of blatant sin is so much prevalent just within the last 8 to 10 years. I mean, and it's, back in most of us, the 50s, you had Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, all these programs that were wholesome. And for the most part, I remember, like Lassie, he got a whipping, and they would share Bible verses and talk about it and pray, and but today, I don't know of any program you can find that in today. There's just nothing. And he was going to punish all of them, male and female, because of what they were doing. And this is what he's talking about in verses 15 through 19, letter D. Judgment on the idolatrous worship. Now, remember, I said in the book of Hosea, it's like Judges. It goes in cycles. Okay, he declares their sin and shows what they're doing. And then he declares there's going to be judgment. And then he declares hope. And the hope depends upon repentance. And that's the same cycle you see. There's 7 cycles in the book of Judges, the same kind of thing. And but the thing is, well, because this is what you hear so often, God wouldn't send somebody to hell. Not really, you send yourself. You made the choice. Every choice you make, there's a consequence. So you chose to, like Pharaoh, harden your heart against God. In football, you stiff arm somebody. Get away from me. And I was talking with my aunt. My sister's back in the hospital, and pneumonia, because she aspirates and stuff goes down in her lungs instead of her stomach. But I was sharing with my aunt, who kind of took care of her down there in Florida, and she's 87. And but she was talking about a friend that he lived by himself. His name's Mark, and he's a Catholic background. But she was trying to get him to think about God, and because he was going to have a heart surgery, and he's about ready to, might die. He said, "Have you ever thought maybe where you're going to go?" No. And it just, and so she tried to share a little bit with him, and just like these people, he wouldn't have anything to do with it. And it's sad, but that's what these people were doing here. So it says in verse 15, though thou, Israel, play the harlot, yet let not Judah offend, and come not ye unto Gilgal, neither go ye up to Bethaven, nor swear the Lord liveth. Now, there's a lot in that verse. And it says, okay, you are playing the harlot. But the next part there, he says, yet let not who be offended? Judah. Now, Hosea is a prophet in the northern kingdom. And as I said, the southern kingdom, they had their problems too. But they did have some good kings. And that's why God delayed the judgment. You know, the northern kingdom, 722, the southern kingdom lasts to about 585, 87, somewhere in there. But, so, God delayed the judgment, but he's saying, look, you are causing your brethren in Judah to follow your examples. And so, for us, to me, that's very important when I'm living in my community and my neighbors. I need to be a good example of what a Christian should be. How I act and react to them, and those kind of things. And so it's very important that we don't offend. And that's what God was warning Israel. It says, you're causing your brethren in Judah, you're offending them. And then he says, and come not ye unto Gilgal, neither go ye up to Bethaven, nor swear, the Lord liveth. Now, Gilgal and Bethaven were places of these cultic sites, that the Israelites would go to. And Hosea, though, kind of changed the name. Bethel means what? The house of God. But if you remember that Jeroboam, we read last week, he got just anybody and everybody to become a priest. And so they didn't have true priests from the Levites. And so instead of saying, Hosea changed the name from Bethel to Bethaven, which means house of wickedness. It says you're not going to Bethel, the house of God, you're going to the house of wickedness when you go to these places. They're wicked. And because of this, and this all happened because of, as I said, Jeroboam the first instituted all of this, because if you remember, Jerusalem was in the southern kingdom, so when they had their feast and all worship, sacrifices, they would be going to the southern kingdom. So he set up these other places of worship, his own religion, his own practices. So, verse 16, for Israel slideth back as a backsliding heifer. Now, the Lord will feed them as a lamb in a large place. And this was sort of a rhetorical question, is what he's asking here. And basically he was saying, okay, I am your shepherd. And since you are not behaving like a compliant, submissive heifer or lamb, but you are becoming stubborn and obstinate, then what he's saying is, no, I can't lead you. When I read that verse, it made me think of my grandpa Fair down in Kentucky. He had an old bull, and they were trying to get him up a chute into a truck. Well, he got halfway up and he just sat down. And you know, if you might with cattle, you got them stickers that you stick and an electric shock. That thing wouldn't move. It was there. So Grandpa said, I'll get him. He got him some straw and stuff, and he built a fire underneath the ramp. When the fire started to get up, the cow jumped up and they got him in. In other words, he was a little stubborn. But folks, sometimes we are stubborn, and sometimes God has to build a fire under us and get our attention and get us going. But what he's saying here, he says, And it goes on in verse 17. Ephraim is joined to idols, let him alone. Now, the word Ephraim means fruitful. Ephraim, again, remember, it's the largest tribe of the 12 tribes. And it was in the northern kingdom. And again, sometimes the northern kingdom is referred to as Israel. Sometimes it's referred to as Ephraim. And just like we say Judah, but there was really two tribes. You had Judah and Benjamin. But it's referred to Judah because it was the biggest one. So, what he's saying here, okay, and again, he's preaching to the people of Israel. And he says, look, Ephraim has joined these idols. So what was the last three words of that verse? Let him alone. In other words, what was God trying to say to the people? Don't join with them. Leave them alone. So the same thing with us. It is important. This is something young people really need to learn. You need to learn your friends, who your friends are and who to associate with. And certain people, you just need to leave them alone. Stay away. And that's what he's saying here. Stay away. Then in verse 18, it says, their drink is sour. They have committed whoredom continually. And now he's shifting a little bit here. Her rulers with shame do love, give ye. In other words, now he's shifting a little bit. And as rulers, I mean, just in our society, you know, our government, that's why Jesus said in the Bible there that if the righteous rule, then the people can rejoice. And God set up rulers who are supposed to rule and help their people. And but these rulers, what's happening is they weren't concerned about the average person out there. What they were concerned about was themselves. And so when these people were in sin, they didn't try to stop them. Why? Because they were with them. They were doing it. And so her rulers with shame do love. In other words, they love the very sins that the people are committing. And so they're doing, I get so excited sometimes. Hello. So the rulers with shame do love. Verse 19. The wind hath bound her up in her wings. They shall be ashamed because of their sacrifices. And this is just a picture. God uses a lot of illustrations. But it's as if the wind is blowing, and like right now, you know, this is tornado season, a couple tornadoes. And so the wind comes along and sucks everything up, and away it goes. And that's what he says, that the wind bounds her up as wings of eagles and just takes off. And it says, they shall be ashamed of what? Because of their sacrifices. And their sacrifices were not to the true and living God. So, what happens? Again, remember, what we're in is a court setting. This is a trial. We're in a court. And so Israel is on trial. And God is accuser. He's accusing Israel of crimes. And actually against himself. And if you remember in Deuteronomy chapters 28 through 33, this is where it says, God says the blessings, if you obey me, but then he also says what? So there's sins of omission and commission. And so what he's pointing out here is when you read through those things, God is saying, okay, you agreed to follow my principles, and you're breaking this one, you broke this one, you broke this, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you know. And so this is what he's showing the depths of their apostasy, going against him. So now in number 2 there, the guilt of both Israel and Judah. So now we're in chapter 5. So there's a general accusation in chapter 4, and but now he's still continuing on, but he's broadening his accusation to even include Judah. And so his emphasis is still on Israel, but he is showing that Judah also was falling under the prophet's condemnation of their actions as well. And as we all know, Judah did fall eventually. Why? Because of their sin. The only reason why it stayed a little longer is because they had a king or two that came along and kind of stayed as a judgment, but finally it came. So, a warning to the priest, people, and royal family of Israel. This is verses 1 through 7. So his target is including here the priest, the people, and the royal family. I don't know who would be left out. In other words, everybody. Verse 1. Hear ye this, O priests, and hearken ye, house of Israel. That's the people. And give ye ear. In other words, listen to what I'm warning you. O house of the king, for judgment is toward you. So that's all 3 groups. Why? Because ye have been a snare in Mizpah and a net spread upon Tabor. Now, what this is, there's a couple ways to look at this. Mizpah and Tabor, you could look at them 2 different ways. They were considered sites of the false worshippers, the ungodly. But they were also sites of, like hunting sites. And so that's why he says they're a snare and a net. So these places were known for their hunting as well. So he's using the analogy of a snare and the net to capture you and snare you. And that's what he's saying here. He said, you priests, you people of Israel, you kings, you are in trouble because you've been caught. You're in a snare, in a net. And so that's what he's talking about here. Then in verse 2, and the revolters are profound to make slaughter, though I have been a rebuker of them all. And again, make slaughter. And that's what he was talking about. The hunter, when you capture them in a snare or the net, then you can slaughter them and dispose of them. And that's what he said. He says here, and you've been a rebuke, or I have been a rebuke to them all. In other words, God is rebuking all of them, and he's promising to chasten them. And why was he doing that? His purpose was to get them to return and to him. And then we'll get another verse or 2 in here. Verse 3. And I know Ephraim and Israel is not hid from me. For now, O Ephraim, thou committest we do something that we think is in secret, well, yeah, maybe from somebody else, but it's not from God. He knows everything. He hasn't been deceived, and he hasn't fallen into this trap or this net. He hasn't been snared. In other words, it doesn't trap him. And so he just, again, he's trying to warn them, look, I know what you're doing. Verse 4, they will not frame their doings to turn unto their God. For the spirit of whoredoms is in the midst of them, and they have not known the Lord. Okay? Let's face it, sometimes sin can be fun, but only for a while, a season. And, you know, it's like the drunkard, you know, the proverb says, you know, you go get drunk, and then you get beat up or whatever, and then you wake up the next morning, what happened? Where was I? I mean, you don't even remember. And so he's saying, what you're doing, all this stuff, because your spirit of whoredom is going after these false gods, it says, you have not known the Lord. You're not seeking God. And it has ensnared him. Really, the world, is it not? They love the lie rather than the truth. And Satan puts a little shiny object in front of them, and then they go, you know, they follow it. And it leads to death and destruction. And so it says here in verse 5, and the pride of Israel doth testify to his face. Therefore shall Israel and Ephraim fall in their iniquity, Judah also shall fall with them. And so he's saying that it's kind of like, you know, somebody who's very proud, they got their nose stuck up in the air. If you got your nose stuck up in the air, you can't see where you're walking, and you stumble and fall. And that's kind of what he's saying here. He says, you fall because of your iniquity. And but he says, not only you, but Judah, I'm warning you too. Don't follow their path. For the most part, they didn't. But there was a lot of them that did, kings. And so God says, I won't hold you guiltless. I only got 2 more verses. Let's try to get through this. They shall go with their flocks and with their herds to seek the Lord. They shall not find him. He hath withdrawn himself from them. And in other words, what he's talking about here, you're going to bring your animals for the sacrifice, and thinking you're going to